Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Vetlek. Today I am going to discuss the anatomy of radius of dog. Radius is a type of long bone which is the main weight bearing bone of the forearm. It articulates with the humerus and ulna proximally to form the elbow joint, while distally it articulates with the carpal bones and ulna to form the antebrachiocarpal joint. So proximally it forms the elbow joint and distally it forms the antebrachiocarpal joint. Radius has two extremities, a proximal extremity and a distal extremity. Between these two extremities, proximal and distal extremity, there is a long body. This body has further two surfaces and two borders. If we talk about the surfaces, then it has a caudal surface and a cranial surface. Similarly, it has two borders. One is the medial border and other is the lateral border. First, I'll discuss the extremities of humerus. If we talk about the proximal extremity of humerus, then it contains a head, neck and a radial tuberosity. Head of radius is oval shaped and it contains a small depressed articular surface. This one is the small depressed articular surface which is known as fovea capitis. And this fovea capitis articulates with the capitulum of radius and ulna to form the elbow joint between the radius, ulna and humerus. So this fovea capitis is actually the articulating surface of the head. The other part of the head of radius is the articular circumference, which is present at the caudal aspect of radius bone. This is the articular circumference and it articulates with the radial notch of ulna. This articular circumference is actually a smooth osseous band, which means that it is a joint covered by cartilage. It forms a joint which is covered by a cartilage. So this head of the radius contains fovea capitis and articular circumference, and overall the head of radius is oval, and the fovea capitis articulates with the capitulum of humerus and ulna to form elbow joint, and the articular circumference is present at the caudal aspect of radius bone. Then just distal to the head of radius, neck is present. This is the neck of radius. So just distal to the head, neck is present here. This is the neck of radius. Then another structure is present which is present craniolaterally here, and it is called as bulbous eminence. This structure is present craniolaterally, and I'll discuss it in a greater detail later in this video. Then just below the neck at the caudomedial side, there is a tuberosity which is known as radial tuberosity. So radial tuberosity is present here. As this is the caudal surface, this whole is the caudal surface of radius bone, and this is the medial aspect of radius bone. So here the radial tuberosity is present at caudomedial aspect of radius bone. This is the caudal surface and this is the medial border. So here radial tuberosity is present at caudomedial aspect. This is the neck of radius. Similarly, at the same transverse plane, at the lateral surface, at the lateral aspect of radius bone, caudolateral aspect of radius bone, there is a large eminence which is present here at the same transverse plane of the to the radial tuberosity. So this is the large eminence, and I'll discuss its function later in this video along with the bulbous eminence which was present here. Now let's talk about the body of radius. Body of radius is compressed and it contains two surfaces. One is the cranial surface and other is the caudal surface. The cranial surface is smooth and convex, as you can see. This is the cranial surface. So cranial surface is convex and smooth, while on the other hand the caudal surface is rough and concave. These both surfaces, cranial and caudal surface, actually give attachments to muscles, and I'll discuss these muscular attachments separately in this video. So now let's discuss only the features of these two surfaces, cranial surface and caudal surface. Now, if we see the caudal surface, then it contains an interosseous border. This is the interosseous border which divides the caudal surface into two unequally divided areas. So these areas are two-third. This two-third portion is the medial part of the caudal surface, while this is the one-third lateral part of caudal surface. This two-third medial part gives attachment to muscles, while this one-third lateral part, this part contains interosseous ligament, which actually unites radius with ulna. So this interosseous border is actually dividing the caudal surface into a lateral part and a medial part, and where the lateral part contains the interosseous ligament in order to unite the radius with ulna. Similarly, proximal to the middle of body at the caudal aspect of radius, this is the middle of the body on the caudal aspect of radius. Just proximal to the middle of the body, a nutrient foramen is present. This is the nutrient foramen. So here nutrient foramen is present at the caudal aspect of radius. So this was all about the body of a radius. Now let's talk about the distal extremity of radius and then muscular attachments of radius. The distal extremity of radius is also known as trochlea of radius. So cranially, this trochlea or this distal extremity contains three grooves. These are the grooves. These are the grooves on the distal extremity at the cranial aspect, at its cranial aspect. So these three grooves are present cranially at the distal extremity. Then distally, it contains carpal articular surfaces. These are the carpal. This is the carpal articular surface here. So this is the carpal articular surface which actually articulates with the carpal bones, and these carpal bones are intermedio-radial carpal and somewhat with the ulnar carpal. Intermedial radial carpal means that the fused intermediate and radial carpal, and it also articulates somewhat with the ulnar carpal. So with these two carpal bones, this carpal articulating surface articulates. Then if we see other structures at the distal extremity, then medially a styloid process is present. This is the medial border of the radius bone, and distally here we have styloid process. This is the styloid process. Here this is the styloid process of radius, and laterally it contains ulnar notch which articulates with the ulna. This is the ulnar notch. So laterally we have ulnar notch, medially we have styloid process, cranially we have three grooves, and at the distal aspect, distally we have carpal articulating surfaces in the radius bone. Now let's talk about the grooves which are present at the cranial aspect of radius. So there are three grooves. There is a medial groove which is present medially. Here we have medial groove. This is the medial groove, and it is shorter and oblique. The second groove is the middle groove. Here we have middle groove, and this is longer groove. And third groove is the lateral groove, which is present laterally here. Here we have lateral groove. So total there are three grooves. One is the medial groove, then middle groove, and then third one is the lateral groove. Now let's talk about the muscular attachments of radius bone. Now let's talk about the muscular attachments of radius. I had discussed the bulbous eminence which is present craniolaterally. Here bulbous eminence is present. So it actually has no muscular attachments, but only a supinator muscle passes over it. This is the supinator muscle, and it passes over the bulbous eminence which is present here, bulbous eminence. And this is the lateral aspect of radius. So at this bulbous eminence only the supinator muscle passes, and a sesamoid bone is also associated with this supinator muscle. So here we have sesamoid bone. Then I had also discussed another eminence which was present at the lateral border of the radius bone in the same transverse plane as present the radial tuberosity. So that was a larger eminence, and this larger eminence is present here, and here it is present. This is the larger eminence, and at this eminence only lateral collateral ligament of elbow is present. So we have to discuss two eminence. One is the lateral eminence where lateral ligament of elbow is present. Here we have this that greater eminence, and the other one was bulbous eminence where supinator muscle passes. Now let's discuss the muscular attachments of other parts of radius bone. If we talk about the muscular attachments of radial tuberosity, then we see that only brachialis muscle inserts at the radial tuberosity. So there is insertion of brachialis muscle at the radial tuberosity, and this radial tuberosity, as you know that this radial tuberosity is present medially. So at this radial tuberosity this muscle is present. If we talk about the cranial surface of the radius, so as I have told you that both the cranial surface and caudal surface of radius bone are specialized for the muscular attachments. So at the cranial surface, at its proximal third, there is insertion of pronator teres muscle, and just above this muscle, just proximal to this insertion, there is another muscle which is known as supinator muscle. So this muscle also inserts here. So if we talk about if we discuss these muscular attachments in a order, then we say that just distal to the neck of the radius at the cranial surface, first there is an insertion of supinator muscle, and then at the proximal third of the cranial surface there is insertion of pronator teres muscle. So these two muscles are present at the cranial surface. Similarly, if we talk about the muscular attachments of the caudal surface of radius bone, then as I have told you that there is a interosseous border which divides the caudal surface into two unequal parts. So, one is the medial part, which is the larger part, two-third part of the caudal surface, and other is the lateral part, which is smaller part, and it is one-third of the caudal surface. So at the two-third portion of the caudal surface of radius, which is actually the medial part of the caudal surface, there is insertion of pronator quadratus muscle. So this pronator quadratus muscle is present just medial to the interosseous border at the caudal surface of radius bone. Similarly, at the lateral to the interosseous border on the caudal surface of radius bone, so this there is interosseous ligament. So at the lateral part on the caudal surface there is interosseous ligament. Then I have told you that there is a styloid process which is present at the medial aspect of radius bone, and it is actually present at the distal extremity. So at the styloid process, a medial ligament of carpal joint attaches. So this ligament attaches with the styloid process. This was all about the radius of dog. Thank you.
Start over.